Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first Qdabra webinar in year 2021. My name is Curvy, and we're excited to show you a new special validation technique we just recently developed that you can use in your forms together with FormsViewer. I'm sure some of you have experienced filling out a long form just to be rewarded with tons of error messages once you press submit. I know it's very annoying, especially when you don't know what the required fields are and where they are specifically located in the form. That's why we built this new technique, which I will demo later to show you how it functions and how you can implement it to your own forms. But before anything else, I'd like to open a quick poll just to have an idea whether you're using validation in your forms or not. So let me just open the poll here. All right, so, all right, let's wait for a few seconds here so that everyone can answer. All right, so 50% said that you're adding validation to your forms. That's great. 50% said that they do not use validation. So we're really recommending that you use validations because form users will make mistakes, and it's essential that as form designers, we support users in those moments of failures. So that's why our topic today is all about validations and to give you more ideas on how to improve your validation techniques. So let me just close the poll here. Thank you for participating. Okay. All right, so in this webinar, we'll be discussing the importance of form validation and some key best practices in implementing it. I'm also going to show you the special technique that I mentioned earlier that you can use to automatically jump to the fields with validation errors so that it's easier for the users to find them. And lastly, we have a bonus topic to discuss on how to enable ribbon button in communication sites, which will be discussed by Mel Clemente, our forms design lead here at Qdabra. So why validation is important? So you need validation as it serves as a security measure to your forms. Forms are connected in some place where we store the data entered by users. It can be a SharePoint list, library, or even a database. If we let people enter whatever they want in the form, two things can happen. One is that the data may not be stored successfully in your data source if the users entered some random characters in the fields, especially when you have configured specific data types for your columns. So let's say, for example, you have a phone number column with a number or numeric as data type. If the user entered some non-numeric character in the control that is mapped to that phone number column, then the data won't be saved successfully to that data source. Another thing that can happen is if the users left the important fields in the form as blank, then you won't be able to capture the specific data that you'd like to get from the users, especially when you're using this data for reporting. You want to make sure that while you're doing data analysis, you get quality or validated data, which is something that you can trust and use to make informed decisions. So there are a lot of best practices in implementing form validation, but here are some of them. So first is display at the right place. So first tip is to add the validation error messages at the right place. In FormsViewer, we use the command get errors to get all of the validation errors from the form, and you can display it as a text box. So to know how to use this command, visit our InfoBat Dev forum. There's a specific lab in our recent FormsViewer training where we showed how to use the get errors command to display validation errors. In fact, I actually add that link in here in the slide. So after this webinar, once you get the package, you can click on this link and go to that link. All right. So if you have a small form, you can add the validation errors at the bottom of the page near the submit button, like this one that I have here. So let me just open a sample form here. So as you can see here, here's a sample end of day report, and it's just a simple form. And if I click on the submit button, it's going to show you the error messages below the submit button. But if you have a very long form, it may make sense to place the validation error summary somewhere that is easy for the users to see without having to scroll the form. So having a task pane in your form would be perfect, as you can add the error messages on it. So here is a sample. So if I click on this checkbox in here, you're going to see that we have here a sample task pane at the right side. So typically task panes appear on the right side of the window. And even if you scroll down, the task pane will stay put, which allows the error messages to stay visible in the eyes of the user. So we actually have another specific lab in our recent FormsViewer training where we showed how to add task panes in Forms. So if you're interested in doing that, go check out the link in the packages in InfoPath dev, InfoPath dev, sorry. All right, so let's go back to my slides. Okay. All right. So next is display at the right time. So we want to make sure that every time the user adds or changes a value on the field that needs to be validated, the error summary should also be refreshed. So that's why we wanted to trigger the validation rules every time a required field is changed. So if we look at the form and check its rules, so let me just open the form here in InfoPath Designer. So if we go to, let's say, for example, the first name, which is a required field, as you can see, I have here a validation rule. We always run the validate action here, which actually points to a validate node in under form logic secondary data source. So if we go to that data source and navigate to the validate, you're going to see that it's running the get errors command in here. So we do that in each of, or we add that rule in each of the required fields in here. As you can see, so in email, we also have that. So if we go back to our form here, let's say, for example, we add a sample data in here under referred by name. And if I click tab, you should be able to see that it's going to be removed in our task pane. So if I click tab, you're going to see that it's removed. That's because we always trigger the validation rule using the get errors command in our form. So next, best practice is use the right color. So for error messages, including validation errors, we want the users to see them clearly so they can locate them right away and enter correct values to the fields. We don't want the users to waste their time finding where these fields are. So that's why when using the get errors command, we developed it in a way that you can display the error messages and at the same time, you can see the controls or fields highlighted in red, just like what you're seeing in here. So that's also the reason why the focused validation technique is built, which is a tool developed by Kaoru Okumura, one of our techno project managers here at Qdabra, so that users can easily find the fields in forms that have validation errors and make the necessary changes to satisfy the required characters or format for each field. So what is this new validation technique that I'm talking about? So it's actually a custom QRules command called custom focus validation error. It's a command that runs a JavaScript file which allows the user to jump to the first field in the form with validation error. So I'm going to go ahead and demo this using the sample form that I showed earlier. So going back to the sample form. So if I go at the top of the form, and as you can see, I have here a button in our task pane called Go to Next Validated Field. So if I click on that button that I added, it's going to go to the next field with that validation. So auto-focusing on the field gives the user an indication and a starting point so that they're able to quickly start filling out the remaining required fields. So by doing that, you reduce the time spent by the user in filling out the form. So with the focus validation technique together with the get errors command, which gives the fields that red highlight, the fields become prominent and focused, which allows the users to complete the forms quickly and without confusion. So going back to my slides. All right, so how is this technique used? So I'm going to show you what I did in the sample form to implement this focus validation technique. So let's open the InfoPath Designer here. So I actually added a resource file here called focus validation error.js. So that's the file that Kaoru created. So if I open that in a notepad, you're going to see a few lines of code in here. It's actually a JavaScript file. So that's what we're running when we call the command. So after adding that as a resource file, we're going to go ahead and run that resource on form load. So in here, in Qdabra rules finish loading node, it's running the run on load under the XTP logic data source. So if we go there and navigate to the run on load, you're going to see that there's an action called load, a rule called load resources. And down here, we have the command load resource, which loads the focus validation error.js, which we added as a resource file in this form. So next is we add validation rules to each required field. So for example, this first name, we have a validation rule here where if the condition donor first name is blank, then it will display this in the error message summary when we use the get errors command. So we trigger the get errors by triggering this or adding this action here called validate. So again, if we go to that node under the form logic, you're going to see that the get errors command is being run in here. All right. So, and lastly, to execute the focus validation, we're going to add the custom Kuros command in our button here. Let's see. All right. So this is the button that I'm clicking earlier. So go to next validated field. And if I click on the set focus, which is under the form logic again, here, it's actually running or calling the command custom focus validation error. So just to recap, so we added the focus validation error JavaScript as a resource file. Next step would be to load the resource on form load by using the load resource command. The third step would be to add validation rules to all the required fields, and I use the get errors command to add those red highlights to fields. And lastly, to execute the focus validation, set the command field to custom focus validation error. So that's how easy it is to implement this new focus validation technique that we've built for you. So I think that's it for this new validation technique. So we'll now proceed with the bonus topic on enabling ribbon button in communication sites. So Mel, are you ready?
Yes, thanks, Kirby. That's a
All right.
wonderful demo. Hello, everybody. Let me try to share out here. It's been a long time since I last did a webinar, and I'm excited to show you what I have going on. Just hold on. Okay, sorry about that. I'm trying to show the correct monitor here. Kirby, can you confirm that you're seeing the YouTube channel or Qdabra YouTube channel now?
Yes, yes, I am. Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, so just briefly want to talk about how you can customize your SharePoint ribbons in a communication site. So back in January 23rd, Jimmy demoed this wonderful technique on how to do that in a team site. But one of our customers wanted to try the technique on a communication site, only to find out that it's not working out of the box. So there are some few kinks that we discovered that will, help you do just that. So if you want to go back to this YouTube video, we have a link in the slide deck that you're going to get. To so you can follow the instructions from Jimmy there now how to set it up, or just have a quick idea on how to do the exact same technique on a communication site with some additional steps here. So just a quick preview of what Jimmy did back then. This is a team site that he demoed, and notice here, if I click new, a Word document, from that ribbon, the default behavior is that it opens a blank template, all right? But some users would want like a quick link, like for example, a template there. So this is a custom button here. It doesn't come by default in your SharePoint team site, in your Office 365 team site. So this was created from the technique in that demo. Okay. Let me refresh here. I thought I'd try this earlier. Let's try that again. Okay. All right, so that doesn't seem to be working anymore. I guess Jimmy deleted the script, but okay, I'm just gonna do that in our communication site here. That was there. The purpose was it was creating this new proposal document from a template. The template had these headers already, so that users can just start typing away their content. Okay. I was hoping to show you what the button really does, but let's set it up on a communication site here so you can see the error message and whatnot. So here's a communication site that I created, and all you have to do to create one is to go to that, click on that waffle icon in the upper left corner of your Office 365 site, go to SharePoint, and then up here, create site, and you'll be asked if you want a team site or a communication site. What's the difference? You basically want a team site if you're collaborating with people outside of your organization, because apparently communication site is only if you want to, communicate to people inside your organization. That's the basic. That's basically the main difference. So think about your team sites as where you collaborate, and communication sites is where you communicate. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and, okay, actually did that. So that's what you want to do there. Click on communication site and give your site the name and click finish when you're done. So because I've created one already, let's go there. And then I'm going to go to internal documents here. This is the document library that I created earlier. You see that these are still the stock buttons on the ribbon. And what we want to do is to add a custom one, okay? So let's see here. I'm going to right click here and then inspect. F12 also works. I just need the console. All right. And you can disregard all those. And then I'll be, so these were the scripts that Jimmy shipped in that in the webinar package. So this is just, this first script is just telling the page to allow us to load custom actions. So I pasted all of those codes in here in the console and then hitting enter. So now it finished loading the script. I'm gonna load the next one or run the next one. But okay, here, this is the default. There's some boilerplate text here where you're supposed to replace the values with your SharePoint site URL and the library name and all those. But I do have that ready here on my other screen. So if I paste that or copy that and paste it here. So here I say, this is my link to my webinar communication site, internal documents library. I want to name that custom ribbon button, the expense report link, because I plan to add an expense report link up here. Okay. And the text I want to show is expense report. And here's a link to my form in FormsViewer. So once that button is clicked, I want users to be taken to the expense report form that we published in our FormsViewer site. And then the icon for that URL, which is the default FormsViewer icon. Okay. But now, again, I'm on a communication side. I'm not doing anything special yet. If I hit enter here, let's see what happens. We get this for 403 forbidden error. So that is because apparently communication side is the custom scripts or customizations on a communication side is disabled by default, and we can we can take away that gap by using running two codes in here in the SharePoint Online management shell. Okay, so we are going to ship these two lines of code. Sorry, we're going to ship these two lines of code that you're supposed to run in the PowerShell, the SharePoint Online Management Shell. Okay, so here I provided some guidance text there to change all these, including the brackets, with your admin. So first you need to have global admin permissions to your site, right? And then enter the URL to your SharePoint admin center here, and then the link to your communication site here. Okay, so I've downloaded this guy and installed it. So we are including this link in the slide deck as well. And then I'm just going to grab the two lines of code that's already customized, and I'm launching here my management shell. So pasting the command. So again, it's already configured to work on the site that I want to customize, and then hitting enter here. And then we'll see what happens. So it's going to ask you for your login, and that's why you need to be a global admin, because otherwise this command will not succeed. So let me just log in here. Okay. All right, so looks like that's done. Let's go back to our site here. Now, if we run the same JavaScript here, I'm copying again and pasting and hitting enter again, we're not going to get the 403 forbidden error anymore, and this should have succeeded. Now, if I close this now, I don't need that anymore, and refresh the page. There's our expense report link right there with the icon that I specified. And if I click on that, right here, we're seeing that I'm taken to the FormsViewer template link for our expense report form, which is going to load really soon. Right here. Okay. So again, that's that. And in Jimmy's webinar, although it's team site, he demoed opening template, a Word document template. But in our scenario as forms designers, right, we are probably more into a scenario where we want form links in that ribbon and what have you. I even tried this with just a Google link, and it still works. So yep, go ahead and explore your sites from now on, and just know that it also works in communication sites. That's it for me. Hope you enjoy this webinar.
Thank you, Mel, for that detailed steps on how to enable the ribbon buttons. So, all right, let me just share again my screen here. Thanks, Mel. Okay. So I hope everything that we've discussed is clear to all of you, and we hope you could apply these new techniques to your forms. But before we end this webinar, um, but before we end this webinar, um, we want to know if you have some questions. So please feel free to put it in the question box, and we'll do our best to answer. So while we're waiting, Yesha will explain a bit about FormsViewer and how you can benefit in using this product. So Yesha?
All right, so thanks, Kirby and Mel. So we'd like to take this chance to briefly introduce Forms Viewer. So for those of you who are not familiar or haven't heard of Forms Viewer before, it's the only application out there that is dedicated to let you continue your InfoPath investment that offers an affordable and attractive solution. You may have heard Microsoft will discontinue support for InfoPath by 2026. And with that, the best solution for you is to migrate with Forms Viewer without rebuilding your forms from scratch. And it's not just a replacement for InfoPath. Forms Viewer is dedicated to provide your forms modern technology features, as Kirby and Mel showed earlier. Our support for CSS JavaScript can quickly upgrade your forms into a responsive rendering for mobile browsers. We also have numerous template parts that you can implement to your forms, such as the central flows, wherein in just minutes you could have an approval workflow process. So your forms can also have other cool features such as task panes, overlays, sliders, validation, auto logout, auto refresh, and so on and so forth. And with that being said, we encourage you to check it out. It is available on SharePoint app, which we just shipped the latest Forms Viewer version 5.2.3 last January 12. So if you have any questions or need any assistance with Forms Viewer, please don't hesitate to contact us at support@qdabra.com and we would be happy to meet with you. That's it for me, Kirby.
Thank you, Yesha. So we have a few questions here. So first from Chris and Peter Miller. So I think their questions are the same. So they said, does the technique that Mel demoed work in on-prem SharePoint 2016? So Mel, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if it does or does not work, but what I know is the scripts work for modern UI, and I doubt if SharePoint 2016 already has the modern UI. And if it does, then it might work. That's my hunch, but we'll get more. I can get more information from Jimmy on that, and we'll get back to you, Peter and Chris. Thanks.
Thanks, Mel. So another question from Catherine Brewer. How does focus validation determine the order of fields? Example, when the order of fields in the list generated by get errors is not the same as the order of fields in the form view. So to answer your question, Catherine, I believe the answer to that is um, what it it what do you call this? Uh, it uh, it gets the order from the form view because it's actually a JavaScript file and it looks for the next validated field in the actual form view in the browser. But I am not really sure about that. I may need to ask Kaoru again to confirm that. So I'm gonna get back to you on that as well. Thank you for all of your questions. So looks like we don't have any other questions. Again, we would like to thank Kaoru for developing this tool for our validation needs and also to Mel and Yesha for your help in preparing for this webinar. And lastly, thank you everyone for attending. We'll be sending the webinar package soon so you can start applying this new technique to your form. So thanks again and we hope to see you in our next webinar. Bye.